Hello, and welcome to episode 7 of the Aquarist podcast. I'm your host, Randy Reed. I'm going to keep this pre-interview section brief and update you all on a new addition to the 75-gallon tank. And that addition is a 20-pound cylinder of CO2. Yes, I have moved into the high-tech world of planted tanks. I've been injecting CO2 for about a week and a half now, and so far I have noticed the Java ferns taking really well and showing signs of what I can only call more robust growth. The Vallisneria in the background and some newer additions of dwarf Sagittaria seem to be taking it slow, but time will tell if their growth ramps up. I'm playing it on the safe side and being very conservative with my CO2 dosing. So with time, I will gradually increase the amount of CO2 I am injecting as I become more familiar with this new resource. If you have any good lessons learned from your experience with dosing CO2, I'd love to hear about it. Send me an email at aquaristpodcast@gmail.com or stop by the Aquarist Podcast Facebook page and leave a comment. That wraps up this part of the episode. On to the interview. Today's date is Wednesday, February 28th, 2018. Today I'm joined by Joe Ferdenzi. Joe has been a killifish fanatic since a very young age, having bred numerous species of killifish throughout his time in the hobby. Joe is also a lifetime member of the American Killifish Association, currently serving as their committee chair for beginners. So Joe, welcome to the Aquarist podcast.
Oh, thank you, Randy. Nice to be with you. Thank you for inviting me to talk to you.
I'm honored to have you on the show, Joe. We were talking a little bit here before we actually started this interview, and
Right.
I mean, you are an awesome fountain of knowledge, and I'm very excited to bring you to my to my show. Why don't if you wouldn't mind just giving kind of a brief overview or an in-depth overview, if you like, of your time in the hobby. So you've been since a kid, you've been a lifelong aquarium guy.
Sure. Thank you, Randy. That's very kind of you. I started keeping tropical fish when I was around 11 or 12 years old. I don't remember exactly, because I had a friend in grammar school who had his own room, and he had fish tanks in there. So I got drawn into it with him. You know, we'd go to pet shops, we'd walk to them, we'd take the subway. This was in New York City where I was growing up. And one year, as a gift, he gave me the Innes book, the famous William T. Innes book, Exotic Aquarium Fishes, which is probably even to this day, the most famous aquarium book ever published in America, on the aquarium stuff. So this was also the first aquarium book I'd ever owned. So I read this book, Randy. I read the entire book. Then I read it again. Then I read it a third time. I memorized this book. This book became my Bible. Well, when I was reading this book, now what Innes was famous for was for being the first guy to illustrate tropical fish via color photography. Okay, and in this book, he had a photograph of a male blue galaris, which is a killifish from Africa. Well, when I saw this picture, I said to myself, I was a little kid, oh my God, look at this thing. It's the most exotic fish I've ever seen. Now, I've been to local pet shops, but I had never seen anything that looks like a blue galaris. I mean, any of your listeners, if they just go on the internet and look up a picture of a blue galaris, and especially if they look up the Innes photo, because even to this day, even 50 years later, in my mind, it is still one of the best photographs of a blue galaris I've ever seen. Well, this thing was so exotic looking, I said, oh my God, where could I get this? And, and so on and so forth. And so that little episode grew my interest in killifish. And then when you started going to pet shops and you realize nobody has them, it sort of piqued my interest even more, because these things look so exotic, and yet they were so unavailable that just from that moment on, that's what started my interest in them.
And Joe, the blue galaris, that's the symbol fish, right, in the American Killifish Association logo?
Yes, that was chosen in 1962 or 63. But, the American Killifish Association was founded in 1962, and it's the oldest national specialty organization in the United States. And when they were debating what fish to choose as the emblem, they chose the blue galaris because it's number one. It's one of the largest of the killifish. One of the largest killifish there is. Number one, so that makes it striking. And then number two, the killifish has what I call a tripartite tail or caudal fin. It's got three like filaments coming out of it, which is a very, very rare thing among tropical fish. The only other tropical fish that we commonly keep that has what I call a tripartite tail is the emperor tetra. Okay, but the emperor tetra is nowhere near as large or has the colors that a blue galaris has. So a blue galaris is a very, very striking looking fish, even if you've been in the hobby a long time. And I'm talking about freshwater fish now because, marine fish, that's a whole different kettle of,
yeah, so
creatures.
I'm going to admit something here.
Fish,
so the blue galaris, I thought when I saw that emblem, I figured that what the AKA had done was just take three different components, right? Some like three different, features of various killifish, and they're like, oh, well, that's that's very democratic of them. They probably voted, and everybody had a different part of a killifish that they liked, and they all put it into one logo. And then now that you're telling me,
fictional fish,
exactly, we want to appease everybody. So you might have been you might have been the people that like the zebra vertical stripe, so they put that more in the towards the tail section of the fish, But to actually see these pictures and to have you say that no, that is legitimately what the fish looks like. I mean, it is. Yes. It's a stunner.
Yes, that's exactly right. You're exactly right. So that's what got me started, with my lifelong interest in killifish. Now, of course, I didn't know anybody who kept killifish at the time, and so my real involvement in the killifish hobby didn't start until 1975. And that year, I was reading TFH magazine, Tropical Fish Hobbyist magazine, or some other magazine. I don't know. I've always read a lot, so whatever I could get my hands on, I read. And I see an announcement that the American Killifish Association is going to be having its annual convention on Long Island. And, I lived in Queens County, which is part of New York City, but it's also part of Long Island. And that it was being hosted by the Long Island Killifish Association. And I said, oh, my God, there's a Long Island Killifish Association? So I wrote to the person who was the president of the Long Island Killifish Association, and he invited me to a meeting. And so I've been involved now in the organized, killifish hobby since 1975 because I became a member of that local club, and I attended my first American Killifish Association convention in 1975. And let me tell you, that was an eye-opener. Anybody who wants to be mesmerized by killifish, you have to go to an American Killifish Association convention because you will see on display more killifish in one place than you'll ever see anywhere else. You'll be amazed at the variety of killies and the colorfulness of these killifish. I was bowled over. And that's it. And you meet a lot of nice people. Killifish people are really great hobbyists. They don't do it for the money. There's no money in killifish. If somebody thinks, I'm going to start breeding killifish and make a lot of money, stop now.
And so it looks like,
won't happen.
Yeah, and it looks like so for 2018, the Killifish the convention's going to be in Detroit on May 25th Correct. Through 27th. So if you're listening to this before that date, you've got time. Get yourself, Is that Romulus, Michigan? Technically, it's in Romulus?
Yeah, I forgot the exact name of the town where the hotel is, but
interesting.
I think it's somewhere near Detroit. Yeah.
So and it looks like we've got some international speakers and some good looking.
Oh yeah.
Some cool sounding titles of some talks. So.
Right. So we always have people from overseas. Whether they're from Europe or South America. In 1975, our main speaker came from Africa, and Yeah, so it's a really international group of speakers that we usually have at these conventions, and they have, then in addition to seeing all the fish in the show, there are fish sales where you can pick up killifish at great prices, and then on Sunday there's the big auction. Because one thing that the AKA does that's pretty much different from any other group, every fish that gets entered in the show must be sold at the auction, and all the profits go to the AKA. The person who puts the fish in the show doesn't get 1 red cent. That's how generous.
Yeah, that's
killifish
excellent.
People are.
Yeah, that is fantastic. So Joe,
Mm-hmm.
let's go back a little bit. So you've now joined the American Killifish Association in the 70s.
Mm-hmm. Right.
How does your experience with killifish kind of explode from there, if you will? Did you start with kind of one species in one tank, and it took you a couple years, or kind of paint the picture of your progression now with killifish now that you're in the AKA?
Right. Well, it was like anything else. You learn as you go, and the best thing is being with other killifish people, because that's really where you learn. You can pick up things from books and reading magazines. Certainly, those are valuable resources, but there's nothing like visiting somebody's fish room and seeing in person what they do and how they do it. And as I said, and I'll keep repeating this because this is totally true, and I've been involved in a lot of facets of the aquarium hobby, but I won't belabor that now. I'll stick to killifish. Killifish people are among the most generous people in the hobby. They share things with you. They share fish. They share their techniques. They don't hide things. They don't have secrets, Whatever they're doing that's successful, they will share that with you. And so little by little, I would be getting fish from people. They would give me things, and they would say, okay, this is how you do it, how you breed them. Look, this is how you find the eggs in the spawning mops. So, yes, in the beginning, I started with relatively easy fish, the kinds of fish that lay their eggs in what we call spawning mops, and where you can actually pick the egg off the yarn that these spawning mops are made of with your thumb and forefinger, believe it or not. And then these eggs, you keep them in water, and you see them. They actually, especially if you put them under a microscope, you can see the embryos developing inside the eggs. Because most killifish eggs are relatively large compared to, fish eggs in general. And you can see that development. And so you start off with the easy one. And that's the thing about killifish. And, when I give my talks, I try to dispel some of these myths that so many people think killifish are difficult, and that's just not true. And most killifish are just like any other aquarium fish. They eat everything. I mean, I have a lot of killifish in my fish room that they just eat standard flake food and pellets and freeze-dried stuff. You don't need anything special for them. The water temperature is normal. Everything about them is normal. What people get confused about, Randy, is that killifish are the only group of hobby fish that we have that has a group of fish that are known as annuals. And these fish are the real challenge. They're the harder ones to keep, but they're also the ones with a breeding modality that is unique in our hobby and really exposes you to the beauty of nature, because, annual fish are those fish that in nature, and they all come from either South America or Africa, these annual fishes. These are the fish that come from these temporary rain pools in nature, and before the rain pool dries up, the adults lay their eggs in the mud or the sand at the bottom of these pools, and when then the water is totally gone and these pools desiccate, the eggs do not, because they're buried in the mud and they stay moist. And then when the rains come again, a whole new generation hatches out in these pools. And you can replicate that at home. And I've done it a number of times, and I can tell you, you have to know that I come from a background of breeding a lot of different kinds of fish, and they're all enjoyable, but there's nothing quite as thrilling as taking what looks like a blob of mud, throwing it into a small container of water, and coming back 12, 24 hours later and seeing hundreds of fish swimming in this container that previously just held a blob of mud.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
It really is amazing how life, it finds a way in those, even the harshest of conditions that, they have, that annual lifespan where, they also grow very fast too, correct? In the annuals?
Yes.
Yeah, so they grow fast, they reach sexual maturity very fast, and they reproduce. So I'm going to go on a limb and say now evolutionary, as far as evolving, are the males of the annuals, are they typically more colorful to, trigger that spawning behavior more aggressively, I guess, in the females, or do you tend to find that color-wise they're in line with the other killifish? So that's kind of a little theory I've got cooked up.
That's a good question. Very good question. They're pretty much in line with the other killifish. For those who aren't that familiar with killifish, the vast majority of killies, not all of them, but the vast majority, the males are strikingly colored, and the females have no color whatsoever. That's so you have to be careful when you have more than one kind of killifish at home. Never put them together because chances are you won't be able to tell the females apart. So many of them look alike, the females, regardless of what species they're from. But when it comes to whether they're annuals or non-annuals, you can find a lot of very, very colorful non-annuals, and those are the ones that are as easy to keep as any tropical fish. I grant you the annuals are more difficult, but they're only a small segment, of the killifish hobby.
Yeah, and so you've just dispelled the, all killifish die after 1 year. They're the short term
myth going.
they're the short term lease, fish. Or the short-term lease car of the fish world, I guess. So if you're the type of person that wanted a new, you want a new car every year, you want a new fish every year, get one of these annual killifish. So that's just for the annuals, not all the killifish. And the other one I think you've dispelled that I've seen on the internet is they only eat live food. But and you're saying that you being a master breeder.
Yeah, I don't know how that got started because I think I know how it got started, Randy. Because annuals, this is true. I always tell people. Annuals are like frogs. You ever keep a frog? A frog won't eat anything that isn't alive and moving. And annual killifish are like that. That's true.
And how about
but not the other fish, not the other killifish. They'll eat anything.
Gotcha. And so now how about kind of the third major one I see is that they're, some of the most aggressive fish that you could possibly keep, and they will kill everything.
No, yeah, right. Yeah, well, that myth probably comes about because they're called killifish, which we know, especially here in New York City, where we have bodies of water called kills. That's just a Dutch word for a small body of water. They call it a kill. So we still use that word around here in New York City because, of course, this was a Dutch colony before it became an English colony. So that's probably where that comes from. In fact, I tell beginners all the time that when they ask me, can I keep this killifish in a community tank, I'll say, yeah, you can, but I'm warning you, they're very shy. So if you keep them in a community tank, you may not see them. So it's just the opposite. Most killifish are rather shy, not aggressive at all. There's exceptions to every rule, of course, which is, what we try to inculcate, with beginners. We try to steer them towards the fish that are somewhat easier to keep. One of the programs we have in the AKA, if you join the AKA and sign up for the special beginners program, you get a pair of killifish from various members, including me. I donate the fish. The new member, all he or she is paying for is the shipping, okay? but they get the fish for nothing. And the fish we normally ship to beginners is the Fundulopanchax gardneri. It doesn't have a common name, so I'm not trying to show off. It just doesn't have a common name. We call them gardneris. They're from Africa. They're non-annuals. It's a very colorful fish. I mean, picture a fish about the size of a betta, a Siamese fighting fish, but it's like it's blue. It's like a sky blue color with these red dots all over it, and then the unpaired fins are blue with a red stripe followed by a yellow stripe. I mean, come on. You can't find a more colorful freshwater fish than that, and they eat everything.
Yeah, and so I'm looking at the beginner page right now, and I see, so when you go to the American Killifish Association, you can click on the beginner species, and they have the list of the 3 species, and there are the gardneri. So you've got 2 gardneris on there, and from what I've done of research, and you can of course correct me on this, but the way killifish names are done is that typically the last part of the name will be the location of where they were.
Correct.
So I see McCurdy.
Correct.
And then Maasai?
McCurdy, Inadiri, Massaje.
Oh,
yeah.
Massaje,
All
okay.
those are location names.
Okay,
Correct.
so we've got those 2, and those are, you can actually click on the links and it'll pull up a picture. One is, one of the gardneri is a little bit more red and blue with yellow trim, I guess you would say, and then the other one is just a lot more blue in the body. And then you've also got the Florida flagfish as kind of the third option.
That was recently added.
And now
somebody in the AKA was generous enough to somebody who lives in Florida, I believe, was kind enough to say, "Hey, I can supply this fish," and that's a beautiful native fish, Jordanella floridae, which they sometimes call the flagfish. And that's one of the few killies, by the way, that you do see in pet shops from time to time because it's collected in Florida, and it's also bred on fish farms in Florida. I'm not sure, but yeah, that's a pretty native fish.
So let's talk. I kind of want you to guide me through because I think after this conversation, it might be tonight or tomorrow, but definitely this week, the last week of February. First week of March, I'm going to join the American Killifish Association, and
Great.
I'm going to take you guys up on your offer because I have a little real estate in a 10-gallon tank right now that's empty. So
then it's perfect for a pair of gardneri.
Yes, so I was going to say, walk me through between the gardneri. Now, obviously, I'm assuming then the difference would be kind of which color catches my fancy between those 2 and the Florida flagfish. If I'm a beginner,
and understand this, Randy. Believe it or not, I haven't looked at the. This is funny, but I haven't looked at those photographs. But I could tell you this. Photographs are funny. Depending on how the light struck the fish at the moment the photo was taken, whatever. I could tell you this. All the various kinds of gardneri that are available, they're equally beautiful. And I've got them all. I've got the 3 that we've offered in the past are location-wise are the Inadiri, the McCurdy, and the Massaje, and I've got all 3. And I can tell you, all 3 of them are equally beautiful. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm thinking
they're easy to keep because, like, a 10-gallon tank is perfect. Okay, and the only thing I always tell people you have to make sure about the tank. This is almost as important as the water quality, okay? You have to cover every little opening in the tank. These fish are Olympic jumpers, okay? If you leave a little opening on the top of your tank, you will be minus a killifish within a short period of time. So that's number 1. Number 2, the males, what they want to do all day long is eat and breed. So the females have to have places to hide. You have to have plants in the tank. You have to have something, rock work, something. The spawning mop is a place the females will hide in. Not because the males will go and kill the females. They normally do not do that. But they will pursue them aggressively, and the females get tired. So you got to give them places to hide. But other than that, the Gardneri, when it comes to water temperature, they tolerate a wide variety of, normal temperatures from 72 to 76. pH is not a critical thing. All my killifish are in alkaline water, 7.0 to 7.4. But if the water were acidic, let's say 6.8, 6.4, nothing bad would happen either. Everybody's got different water conditions and from, depending on where they live and how they keep their tanks. One trick I learned from a much better killifish hobbyist than me, and who was one of my mentors, is, if you keep a box filter in your tank, you can put crushed coral in that box filter, and it will keep the water from becoming too acidic. Because if the water does drop, like, in the 6.0 or lower range, that isn't good. But that's not good for any fish,
Right.
with very few exceptions. So, but if you put a box filter in your tank, and I use box filters in almost all my aquariums, and you put some crushed coral in there, that's going to help buffer your water,
Yep. And so for the beginners, and I don't think we've really touched on this though, but just as a beginner to the hobby, kind of everything that you're laying out is that these fish are definitely bulletproof fish, and it's not like, there's a trade-off of, well, that's a tough fish, but it's ugly as sin. I mean, this is a tough fish,
right.
and it's gorgeous. So
no, that's true. That's true.
how we're not getting more people out there to keep killifish and be super excited about it. I mean, I don't know. Like, why do you think they're not as prevalent now in the pet stores, like these Gardneri?
Why do I think you don't see them?
Yeah, do you have any theories?
Yeah. Well, they're, to produce a lot of killifish, it's labor intensive because so you can't really, it's very difficult to mass produce them. It can be done, but it's much more labor intensive than a lot of other fish. I mean, when you talk about things like catfish and tetras and barbs, they lay dozens and dozens and dozens of eggs in one fell swoop, and then you can raise them all up at the same time. Live bearers, they keep producing fry constantly. Mouth-brooding African cichlids, they're constantly at it. Big South American cichlids. And believe me, I've bred all these fish, so I know what I'm talking about. Big South American cichlids, they'll give you 1,000 fry in one shot. Okay, killifish doesn't work that way. You get a couple from each female. You get maybe a couple of eggs each day, okay? So, you have to keep picking eggs every day. And then at a certain point, the eggs you picked on day one, when they hatch, they can't be kept with the eggs that hatch on day 14 because now those fry are 2 weeks apart. And in the killifish world, that's not good because the older fish will pick on the younger fish, if not eat them outright. So you can't keep them together. So you got to have all these. If you've ever seen a killifish hobbyist fish room, it's full of little Tupperware containers because we're keeping all these eggs and all these fries separate and growing them out until they're adults separately because we don't want them to prey on one another. So the intensive labor that goes into raising a large quantity of killifish is just not, it's just not what the aquarium industry is about. They want to be able to produce hundreds at the same time. I think that's largely part of the reason that you don't see them often. And there are exceptions. I mean, in pet shops, other than what I've just mentioned about the Florida flagfish, another killifish you do see from time to time in pet shops is a gold form of Aplochilus lineatus. They sometimes call it the wonder killie or the golden killie. It's a golden form that they developed in Southeast Asia, where Aplochilus lineatus comes from originally. It's a Southeast Asian fish. Now, this was always a beautiful fish, and fairly large, and it is the lineatus. So that would include the golden form that you find in pet shops. The only thing about that fish is it's another bulletproof fish, but it's a very aggressive fish. With its females, you have to make sure you have hiding spots for the females, and it will eat any fish that can fit in its mouth. Now, fortunately, it's not a giant fish, so you can keep it in a community tank, but you couldn't keep it with guppies, for example. It would make lunch and dinner out of the guppies, you know.
Oh, gotcha.
But I mention this only because this is a killifish that a person might see in a pet shop, you know. But the golden form, I tell you, the first time I saw the golden form, I was amazed because it really looked like it was made out of 14-karat gold. It was amazing.
So now I see why the people in the killifish hobby are so generous, because you know there's so much work to make more killifish that you know you almost you know, and I say this very jokingly, but you almost trick newcomers into the killifish hobby with the beauty. You get them addicted, and then now you have more people to help breed these very difficult you know, to raise up but beautiful fish. And difficult only in the sense that, you know, as you explained, it's, you know, they lay a small number of eggs each day and you have to keep those separate.
Right.
But yeah,
but
now I get it. Now I see why you're so generous.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Randy.
I was going to say, now I see why you guys are so generous.
But there is another technique which I've, you know, practiced with some killifish, and I've told this to people also. I call it the lazy killifish way, you know, of raising killifish, and that is to have a relatively large aquarium, and by that I mean, you know, 20 gallons or more, and you load it chock-a-block full of plants like Java moss and Java fern and water sprite, and then you let nature take its course. And in that way, you can raise killifish without doing any work whatsoever. The only drawback to that method is you won't raise as many killifish as when you hand pick the eggs and then raise them all up individually, because there will be a certain amount of predation that goes on. But if you have enough plant material, and if the killifish you're keeping is not one of the more aggressive ones, you will be able to raise killifish in a beautiful natural setting without a lot of work. And I have several examples of that in my fish room.
So kind of the colony setup, if you will.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
And then
the key is you have to have a lot of plants.
Yeah, a lot of hiding places for the fry. Now, as far as aggression goes, with having that many adults in there, I mean, if there were to be aggression, there's enough of the members in the colony that all that aggression is then spread out, right?
Right. And I'm not really talking about aggression between the adults. I'm talking about aggression versus fry, which they view as food.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that would definitely be something interesting to try as well. I mean, I think you know, I'm very much into breeding right now. You know, the listeners know that I've got some guppy fry right now, and you know, this is actually my second time back into the hobby, but my first time being successful breeding fish. And I say first time because I've never kept guppies before. So you know, you keep a male female guppy, you're going to be successful. So they just had their second release of fry, and I've got those scooped out in the hang on breeder box, and I've got some rainbow fish fry that I'm growing up in another 10-gallon tank. So I'm feeding those guys all the small little you know, golden pearl 5 to 50
guppies. I have quite a few of them.
Yeah, they're fun, and those rainbow fish fry growing those up. But yeah, I definitely want to try my hand, you know, with these Gardner eye. I think I'll go with that one. I ran it by the wife, and she liked the blue form the best.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think.
Which one is that? Which one is the blue form?
It was the name that I butchered. Let's see here.
It's okay.
Massage.
I'm just curious.
Massage.
Okay.
Did I say it right, or am I just saying massage but with a French sounding name?
Yeah. Massage. It's Misaje. Yeah. Yeah, that's a very pretty one. But I'm telling you, they're all pretty. Doesn't matter. They're all colorful, they're all blue with red dots with the red, the red, blue, and yellow unpaired fins. They all have that in common. So, the real, I have a hard time telling them apart sometimes. That's why I have to be very, very careful to make sure I keep them separated and meticulously labeled. And because God forbid you should mix up any of the females, especially. You'll never be able to tell them apart, ever, ever.
Yeah, so the other thing that I've noticed in doing research on killifish is that, in general, I'm trying to do a better job of knowing the Latin names for fish,
Mm-hmm.
and especially the ones that I'm keeping. But in researching killifish, I've noticed that killifish have the most difficult Latin names to attempt to pronounce. Is there any rhyme or reason why it seems like the killifish have the most difficult Latin names, or is it just because I'm a newbie and I haven't heard how they're pronounced yet?
I think in general, their Latin names are no more difficult really than other groups of fish. I think part of the problem is, as I was saying earlier when I said, Fundalo, Panchax, Gardneri, and I said I have to say that because there's no common name, is that most killifish, because they're not common in the hobby, they don't have common names. So you're stuck with learning all these Latin names, whereas with other fish, you don't have to know the scientific name for a black ruby barb because you can just call it a black ruby barb. You don't have to know the scientific name for a neon tetra, But with killifish, you're stuck. If you don't know the scientific names, you really can't have a discussion with other killifish hobbyists or even people in the business, people, pet shop owners or anybody. So I think that's part of the problem is that you're stuck with having to learn all these Latin words, And yeah, some of them are tongue twisters, I'll grant you that. And, but, it's sort of something you sort of get used to. Plus, here's the other thing I always tell people, Randy, because we have discussions about this. Nobody knows how to pronounce Latin anyway.
You just say it with
I always tell people,
just say it with
there
confidence.
are no recordings of Roman centurions, okay? So everybody who's from a different country pronounces these Latin words differently depending on what country they're from. And they're not wrong because, like I said, nobody really knows how to pronounce Latin since there's no recordings of native Roman speakers, I, for example, I speak Italian. I was born in Italy, and I came here as a young boy, and I'm fluent in Italian. So you would think, oh, Latin, Italian. Oh, Italian is derived from Latin. Must be the same thing. Wrong. But I pronounce my Latin words with more or less with a combination of Italian and English pronunciation, and that's just what I do, and other people pronounce them differently. So I don't want anybody to be discouraged when they're talking about killifish that they may not get the pronunciation right. Believe me, no one really should make a big deal about that.
I think my strategy is just going to be to, whatever I say in Latin, I'm just going to say it with confidence, and hopefully the confidence will let somebody know that, no, I'm saying it right. You're not saying it right.
I think that's a good strategy. I think that's a very good strategy.
And then I'll make them question how they pronounce it. Like, maybe, is that guy right? I don't know.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
So
you never know.
On the note of, the scientific naming and whatnot on killifish, as far as what makes a killifish? So I've looked over the internet. I've looked on, Wikipedia and various tropical fish forums and whatnot.
Right.
And other than being all killifish lay eggs,
right.
what makes a killifish? I mean, is it an extra fin here or there? Like, what is the unique, attribute?
Scientists, an ichthyologist could give you the answer. I'm not an ichthyologist, but I know this. Killifish are the egg-laying analog to live bearers like guppies and mollies and platies and swordtails. In fact, in the old literature, you will see killifish referred to as egg-laying toothed carps. Tooth, Toothed, in that they have teeth, some sort of teeth, and live bearers are known as live-bearing toothed carps, okay?
So now that you say that, I think that was the only thing that was common, was that, egg laying and with tooth bearing. I want to say that was one of the other distinguishing characteristics.
It's something along those lines. And the other thing about killifish is, other than Antarctica, which of course has no fish, killifish are found in every continent in the world except for Australia. And in Australia, they're sort of replaced by, the rainbow fish, in a sense, But otherwise, killifish are found in some of the most inhospitable places on Earth, including, the pupfish in Devil's Hole, which is that, protected water hole in the I forget which desert, but
Death Valley
in Nevada, I believe it is.
I see something that says Death Valley here.
Where?
I'm looking on Wikipedia, and it says Devil's Hole, Ash Meadows National Wildlife Refuge. Okay, it does say Nye County, Nevada, in the southwestern United States. Yeah.
So that fish is found in that one little subterranean water hole in Devil's Hole, Nevada, and no place else in the world. And you can find killifish in deserts. They live in waters that would probably give you a third-degree burn if you put your foot in there, but there are killifish in there, okay? The killifish are also found in brackish water, like, here around New York City with all our lagoons and estuaries, whatever you want to call them. We have killifish in salt water around here. I've had killifish that were collected locally, and they're called Fundulus heteroclitus. It's one of they're so common, they're used as bait, okay? Anyway, I've had Fundulus heteroclitus that I had them in a saltwater tank, and they were perfectly fine. You take them out of the saltwater tank, you dump them immediately into fresh water, like nothing happened.
Wow.
They were fine. I mean, there are so many killifish in the world, and so many of them have such interesting habits or live in such interesting habitats. It's endlessly fascinating. But to get back to, what attracted me and what I think attracts beginners, and I believe rightly so, is the amazing colors these fish have. And they're not man-made. I don't have anything against man-made fish. But when nature creates an animal with such beautiful colors, you just have to appreciate it, that it's nature made. And I don't think there's any group of freshwater fish that can claim as many colorful members as killifish. And believe tetras and barbs, they've got a lot of colorful fish. I mean, anyone who's seen a cardinal tetra and doesn't think it's colorful, has got rocks in their head. But there's still something about killifish, the combination of colors, the arrangement of the colors, that's just, it's like it came out of some artist's, dreams or something. I can't explain it, but that's the thing about them, that they're, especially the African ones, they tend to be more colorful than any of the other, killifish from other parts of the world. But the South American ones, especially some of the South American annuals, oh my God, the finnage on some of them is mind-blowing for such small fish. There's an annual killifish from South America. The genus name keeps changing, so I don't even know what the latest version is, but its species name, which never changes, is dolichopterus. Well, you look that up on the internet. It's also known as the Saberfin Killifish. You look at that fish and you go, oh my God, there's no other fish in the world that looks like it. the finnage on this thing is incredible in proportion to its body. It's just mind-boggling. And that's the world that being into killifish opens up to you, because the variety of killifish and their breeding modalities is so varied. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, so that Saberfin killie, I'm looking at it right now on Google Images.
Mm-hmm.
Those fins are absolutely striking, and I think also in the show
Mm-hmm.
notes. So in addition to having links to the American Killifish Association for listeners to go and check out, I'll put the
Mm-hmm.
name of this fish in there, so it's there for them
Mm-hmm.
to Google, or maybe just a direct link to Google Images that they can pull up. But yeah, I mean that is
Right.
that's an amazing fish as well. Is that fairly common among the killifish hobbyists?
No, but it's around.
Yeah.
But it's we get fish and eggs many times from Europe, because of course, just like the rest of the aquarium scene, there are many fantastic hobbyists in Europe, and many of them are into killifish. I mean, the Germans, the Dutch, the Italians, they're the French. Did I mention the French? Yeah. They're all big into killifish, especially the Dutch and the Germans. And so you can find that fish over there. And, of course, that's the other thing about killifish that made it amenable to being this national organization, is that you can mail killifish eggs to people. In the beginning, when people weren't sure how to mail adult live fish, the thing that made it amenable to being a national organization was that members could mail eggs to one another through the mails, because even non-annual killifish eggs, they take about 2 weeks to hatch. So you could put them in the mail, and they wouldn't hatch while they were in the mail. Unlike a lot of fish where they lay eggs, but they hatch the next day. So that you can't really mail them.
That was going to be my question, if it was the annuals only, given that those eggs go through a more difficult, difficult environmental change.
Oh, yeah, much longer time period. Yeah, well, certainly annuals.
But all of them,
fit
you're
the
saying.
bill, but also non-annuals.
Wow.
You can send through the mail because they take about 2 weeks to develop. Yeah, well, with annuals, the development time of the eggs varies with the species. I mean, some of them you have to wait 6 months.
Oh, wow.
Before they hatch. But most are, you don't have to wait that long. 3 months is about average for most annual killifish. But as I said, the majority of killifish are not annuals. So,
Yeah, and so I think all of these various features of the killifish, if you're somebody listening to the show and you've got a fish room, or you have space for, even a 5-gallon tank, right, for killifish,
sure.
you should at least
yeah,
keep.
For a lot of killifish, 5 gallons is perfectly fine.
Yeah,
for a pair or a trio. Again, it depends on the size of the killifish, obviously.
But these.
Gardneri. The smallest tank I would keep a pair of Gardneri in is the 5.5. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're listening to this and you've got some real estate for a 5.5-gallon tank, join the American Killifish Association, get some Gardneri, and let those things go at it, and just enjoy them for the color, and appreciate the fact that the fish can survive such a wide range of conditions.
Randy, if you have a spawning mop in the tank with them, which you should, you're going to have a lot of fun picking the eggs off the mop, because there aren't many fish you could do that with, okay? There aren't very many fish that you can, take the mop out of the tank, hang it over a bucket, and then carefully look at each strand. And it's always a delight when you see an egg, and you can and these eggs are hard. You can't crush them by picking them, and it's just a lot of fun. It gives you something to do that's just enjoyable, which you can't do with other fish. I mean, I've bred a lot of other kinds of fish, Randy, and trust me, you can't go picking their eggs. for the most part.
Yeah, so nature did a good job of, evolving a fish species that's good for the beginner, in many sense of from
Hmm.
water parameters to, even handling the eggs. I mean, they're
Right.
I dare I say that, they should be one of the fish that maybe a beginner should start with because you're gonna get the satisfaction of that beautiful color as well. So
Right.
Joe is,
Right. Yeah. No. No. It's true. It's just that it's unless beginners know that killifish are out there, they're hard to get, and to find. So yeah, that's why joining the AKA I always thought was a smart move on my part, and certainly a good move on the part of other people. Uh, and I just want to say this, Randy. Though, a lot of people, they look for different things in organizations, and no organization can make everybody happy. But I have to say this, that the benefit of being in the AKA is a long-term thing. If anybody wants to join the AKA and think that, it's like instant satisfaction immediately, they maybe, don't understand that the real satisfaction of being in the AKA comes from the long haul, being in it for a while, and going to your local killifish affiliate club and actually meeting killifish hobbyists. Then you're really, really, really going to enjoy the killifish hobby long term, because it's the people that are in it that are its most spectacular asset, So when you join the AKA, there's a list of affiliate clubs, and hopefully for most people, there's one in their area that they can join,
Yeah, so I see my affiliate club that's closest to me will be Northwest Chillies. They have a Facebook group, so definitely want to get
Hmm.
connected with them. And me, as a member
Right.
of the Greater Seattle Aquarium Society, I would like to, obviously being in it for the long haul and enjoying the killifish and being a part of the AKA and this Northwest Chillies. But I would like to be able to donate a pair of killifish to an auction every once in a while. So I think that would
Yeah.
be cool to give somebody an
Yeah.
opportunity that maybe
Sure.
has never kept killifish before, and say, hey, if you've got a 5.5 gallon tank that's handy,
Right.
these killifish
Yeah.
would be
Yeah.
beautiful for
No,
it.
it's a great idea. I mean, when I give my killifish program, I always bring what I call my instant killifish setup, and I donate it to the club, and then and it consists of, it's a very simple thing. It consists of a 5.5 gallon tank with a cover, because like I said, I want to remind everyone, they jump with a tight fitting cover, a spawning mop, and a pair of killifish. You fill that with water, you're good to go. It's not complicated, So I always bring one of these setups. Oh, and with a booklet for beginners, I bring one of those setups to the club meeting when I give my killifish talk, and then they auction it off. And I always hope that it gets someone interested in becoming a lifelong killifish hobbyist.
Have you ever had anyone write you back or get into contact with you and say, "Hey Joe, a couple years ago I bought your setup, and now I've got
Hmm.
X number of killifish tanks set up. You made me an addict." Have you had any
Not
of that
yet.
happen? Not yet. Okay. Well, hopefully I can
Not
be the
yet,
first.
Randy, but I'm
Hopefully,
hoping.
hopefully I'll be the first
But
for you.
what I do get, when I mail, as part of this beginners program, when I mail fish out to people, what I do get back a lot of, "Oh my God, this is a beautiful fish."
Oh, that is excellent.
I do get that a lot.
Yeah, we're gonna have to connect offline on this conversation as well because I'm not just saying that as lip service. I am going to join the American Killifish Association, and I just want
Right.
to make sure that it's going to be that blue form one. But I'm pretty sure that'll be the one that I go with. And so
Okay.
I'm looking forward to getting a beautiful pair of killifish. So,
Right.
so Joe, I would like to say thank you very much for taking time out of your evening to talk killifish with me. I've definitely
Well,
really
thank you, Randy.
yeah,
It was a pleasure. You ask good questions, and you're very knowledgeable, and you do instant research while we're talking. So it was a pleasure. It really was a pleasure.
Yeah, and just to kind of tease it out there to people listening, Joe, you are also kind of a fountain of aquarium history knowledge. I don't know
Yes,
if I'm
yes,
phrasing that correctly, but
too much.
yeah, but if I could, what I'd like to do is have you on again in the future, and to actually have you talk about the aquarium, just the history of keeping aquariums, because I myself am incredibly fascinated with that subject, and I think my
Hmm.
my listeners would also definitely appreciate hearing about the history of a hobby that they're so enthralled with and addicted to.
Hmm. Oh yeah, and it's a very interesting history. The aquarium hobby has a very unique history. Yeah. No, so I'd love to, Randy. Sure, anytime.
Excellent. Joe, thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful evening. It has been my
You too.
absolute pleasure to speak with you. It has been an honor, that
Thank
somebody
you.
as experienced as you, and that has spoken so many times at so many clubs, that you would take time out of your evening to get on a phone call with me. I definitely appreciate it.
Thank you, Randy. That's very kind of you. I really appreciate that. Okay. Good luck with your continued podcast.
I appreciate it, sir. I had such a great time speaking with Joe and learning more about killifish and the American Killifish Association. The following day of this interview, I did in fact join the AKA, and I am fortunate enough to be receiving a pair of Gardneri from one of their generous members. I would highly encourage you all out there to join the AKA and be a part of a fantastic organization. With members like Joe, you know it's going to be a good group of people. As always, you can contact me on any of the Aquarist Podcast social media accounts through @Aquarist Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or just an old-fashioned email to aquarispodcast@gmail.com. Thank you all for listening. Please like, subscribe, and share this podcast with your fish nerd friends. I truly appreciate it. And now, the sign-off line. Get involved in your local fish club, help grow this wonderful hobby, and have fun with other fish nerds.